You paid more for gas this year than last. A quarter more a gallon, easy. Now read that sign again. Where the price should be, there's a start date instead. And it isn't the one you think. You're already picturing the hostages. For 4 days in August, a British and an American intelligence service didn't lobby Iran's government. They removed it. 1953. 2 names, 1 operation. Operation Boot and TPAJAX. That's not something you do to a rumor. And it didn't happen the moment Washington decided it should. Someone had already said no. In 2013, the agency that ran it admitted as much itself. Carried out under CIA direction, approved at the highest levels of government. Eisenhower's government, not the one before it. And the one signature that should be on the order authorizing it doesn't exist. Not a scandal. Not yet. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh, and he is not who you think. Iran had a parliament. The parliament had picked its prime minister. Not a king. Iran already had one of those. The fight was over an oil company's books. 16% of the profits, and he wasn't allowed to check the sum. He didn't want more money. He wanted to look. Nothing in the oil fields had changed. What changed is what Iran found out other people were getting, a 50-50 split elsewhere. In March of 1951, Iran's parliament didn't complain. It voted nearly unanimously to take the oil back. And for about a year, Mossadegh was the most loved man in the country. For about a year, that was the whole story. Getting the oil back on paper turned out to be the easy part. Britain didn't invade, it stopped the money. Abadan halted, sugar and steel embargoed, Iran's accounts frozen in British banks, and the Royal Navy sent in to embargo the oil itself. None of it needed a single spy. By the middle of 1952, it was working. The record's own word for it. Devastatingly effective. Tens of thousands out of work at Abadan. The government was already hollow before anyone in Washington had approved a thing. And the company doing the strangling? Still around today, under a name you'd recognize, British Petroleum. Someone in Washington had already looked at exactly this plan. His name was Harry Truman, and he said no. As late as 1952, his own government was considering helping Mossadegh directly, against British interests. One president said no. The next one said yes. Nothing in Iran had changed. What changed was not the country. It was the man in the White House. Churchill, harder line than the president before him, decided early in 1953 to wait for a new one and ask again. 2 administrations, only one of them said yes, and the pitch changed with him. Britain persuaded Washington's Secretary of State that Iran faced a Soviet takeover, and a real communist party, organizing real demonstrations, gave that fear something to work with. The problem wasn't solved, it was relabeled, and only the new label unlocked American help. $1 million, authorized in early April of 1953, to be used, in the government's own words, in any way that would bring about the fall of Iran's prime minister. Formal approval from Washington and London didn't arrive until 3 months later, in July. The money moved first. Read that sequence again. A handwritten note in the file claims the president also gave his approval. No written authorization from the president has ever been found. And the meeting where the field officer says he got that approval in person, no official record of that meeting exists either. 2 absences in the government's own paperwork, exactly where responsibility concentrates. The one signature that was required, the king's, came under threat. The Shah opposed the plan. He supported the nationalization. He was told what would happen to him if he refused to cooperate. The man the operation claimed to be rescuing was coerced into signing his own rescue. At 1 in the morning, on the 16th of August, a colonel drove to the Prime Minister's house carrying a piece of paper. The paper had the king's signature on it. Mossadegh read it, said it wasn't real, and had the colonel arrested where he stood. The plot was betrayed, and the agency's own history will not say how, attributing it only to the indiscretion of one of the Iranian army officer participants, and explaining no further. Everyone who had planned it scattered. The Shah fled, Ramsar, then Baghdad, at around 4 in the morning, then Rome, reading from a hotel abroad that he might have already lost. The chosen replacement hid in a CIA safehouse in Tehran. For roughly 72 hours, everyone who had planned it believed it was over. The colonel was under arrest. The general was in hiding. The king was in a foreign hotel. Nobody involved knew they were 4 days from winning. So they tried again, a second chaotic wave. Mobsters hired to riot. Paid demonstrators moved in by bus and truck. Whether the street decided anything or only performed a decision already made elsewhere is a question 2 governments' own paperwork is about to answer. A British Foreign Office memo, once redacted, the American embassy had secretly handed over large sums of money to certain influential people, including a named Ayatollah responsible for organizing demonstrations who knew of the plan. The confession in someone else's handwriting. They wired $10,000 to an intermediary to pass to another cleric for the purpose of organizing crowds. And the officers who sent it were never entirely sure it arrived. And here is the honest version, in the agency's own wording, not mine. The crowd was only partially spontaneous. Station political action assets also contributed to the beginnings of these demonstrations. Historians still dispute how much they decided. The man they removed had dissolved Iran's parliament himself by a referendum reported at over 99%. A rigged vote is not normally answered by a foreign intelligence service. Between 200 and 300 people were killed in the streets that day, a range, because nobody counted. Cheap is not the same as clean. They didn't kill him. 3 years in a military prison, then house arrest at his own village, where he watched for 14 more years the country he had nationalized being run from somewhere else. He died there in 1967. The king was still on the throne. 1953 was not finished. The signing came after. The following year, 5 American oil companies took 40% of the operation, 8% each. A British company before this, American afterward. Iran kept 50% and the deed on paper. The consortium ran the business, signed for 25 years, expiring. The record itself flags this only as coincidence, in 1979. And then, in the early 1960s, the agency destroyed nearly all the files related to the operation. A cheap, deniable success leaves no record for anyone to learn from later. 26 years later, the deposed king was admitted to the United States for medical treatment, over a written warning from the chargé d'affaires in Tehran, predicting worst-case scenarios. A warning well known to the president before he decided. 2 weeks later, students seized the American embassy in Tehran. 66 people were taken. 14 were released early. 52 were still there, 444 days later. They had a word for what might come back at them, and they wrote it down themselves in their own internal report in March of 1954, 25 years before the embassy. Possibilities of blowback against the United States should always be in the back of the minds of all CIA officers involved in this type of operation. The one thing in the whole file that they did write down. The people who seized that embassy said themselves what they were afraid of. Another coup, along the lines of the 1953 coup. Not the film's assertion, theirs, in the historical record of their own stated reasoning. This is the picture you came in with. It is not the beginning. They knew the beginning by name. They said it out loud. 47 years after the operation, a Secretary of State said in Washington that the United States played a significant role in orchestrating the overthrow of Iran's prime minister, and called it clearly a setback for Iran's political development. and confirmed to reporters that same afternoon that it was not an apology. Back to the sign. 1953 is where the argument starts. The argument is why two countries are still contesting that stretch of water. And that water is why the number on the sign moved. You're still paying. See you next time.